Welcome to the 2018 Grants for Change Reader Training. This is for the proposal reading process that happens in the summer of 2018. We're thrilled to have you joining us as a proposal reader and very much appreciate you taking the time to listen to this training, to volunteer in this process, and to help us make just and equitable grants that advance racial justice and racial equity in our community. My name is Andrea Berry. I am the Director of Communications and Engagement here at Maine Initiatives, and I'll be helping you today walk through the technical pieces of the reading process. And I'm very happy to be joined today by Phil Walsh, our Executive Director, who'll be walking you through the high-level mission-related vision and goals of our Grants for Change program and the Reader program in particular.
Hi, this is Phil Walsh, and I also want to start by adding my thanks to all of you. Thank you first and foremost for joining us today on this webinar, and thank you more broadly for volunteering to participate in this process. Our participatory grant-making process is brought to life by each of you who volunteer to read grants and to reflect on our theme of racial justice, and so we are deeply appreciative of your time and willingness to join us in this process, so thank you very much. I'm going to start today by talking a little bit about who Maine Initiatives is and why we do this work. Maine Initiatives is a public, progressive, community-based foundation here in Maine. We were formed in the early 1990s to fund and strengthen grassroots and community-based organizations in Maine, and we do that in two ways. We raise and pool individual donations from people across the state, and then we use those resources to make grants and provide capacity building support to grassroots organizations here in Maine. Our work, I would say, is founded in a couple of core convictions. The first one is that greater justice and equity is possible in our state, that we have the ability to make our communities and our state more just and more equitable, and the essential way to do that is by engaging people around those shared values and creating a deeper understanding and commitment of all members of our community to those core values, and giving people the opportunity to act affirmatively in support of those values. And so this process that we'll be talking about today, the process of the participatory grant-making process and making decisions about how to allocate our resources in support of racial justice, is one of the ways we do that. And then the grants themselves are another way that we do that. So we'll be talking about both of those things today. So this is our agenda really quick of what we're going to accomplish over the next few minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about the overview of our process and then the role of the readers, each of you, in the process. Then we'll jump into the applicant pool and tell you a little bit about who the applicants are this year and what proposals you'll be reading. And then we'll walk you through what it means to be a reader and how that process happens, and what is expected of you and what you can expect in that process. We'll do a little exposition about our theme. This is the third year that we're doing our grant-making theme around racial justice and racial equity, so we want to share a little bit about what we've learned so far and what we're hoping to do around that theme through this process. And then Andrea will walk you through how the reader process happens and how you review and evaluate the proposals using our online system and rubric, and then we'll be done. So the first thing I wanted to do, just in terms of orienting you to our process, is talk a little bit about the different steps in our process. This is a multi-phase process, as is intended to be illustrated by this little roadmap here. Then the map starts over here on the left-hand side in the main insights process. That was a series of community conversations, and many of you perhaps actually participated in those back in summer and fall of 2015, we did basically a statewide listening tour, talking to people about what the issues were that were pressing and of high priority in our community. And out of that process, we, as a Maine Initiatives board and staff, identified racial justice and racial equity as an area where we wanted to put our resources and our energy in terms of our grant making. So we start there. The road starts there. And in terms of the grant making process, it proceeds through the second step, which is the RFP and RFA process. The RFP is the request for proposals, and that goes out to community-based nonprofit organizations here in the state. We ask anyone who is working on advancing racial justice in our state to consider applying through the request for proposals process. And this year we received 28 applications through that process. And the RFA refers to the request for applications, and that is the applications that we seek from individuals across the state who want to be a part of our decision-making process through the participatory grant making. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's all of you. And we have over 360 people who have volunteered to be part of the grant making process this year. Then the next phase of the process is for each of you, all of the readers, to receive and review 3 different proposals and to read those and to evaluate those online. And then we use those evaluations to create sort of a quantified score for each application. And this year, each of our proposals will be read by around 40 different individuals. So we'll be able to get an average score for each proposal from all those different readers. And then we have a grant making committee, which is a subset. It's a cross-class, cross-cultural group of about 50 individuals who are drawn from the reader pool, who come together in October for a 3-day retreat to make decisions and recommendations about the grant making process. So they use all the input that the readers have provided about the grants, and they have a more in-depth discussion about the pool. And they make a recommendation to the Maine Initiatives Board, which in November reviews that recommendation and makes the final grant determinations. So this year we will be selecting 10 organizations from the applicant pool of 28 that applied, and they will represent the 3rd racial justice and racial equity cohort through this process, joining the cohorts that were selected in 2016 and 2017. And those organizations have a full program of cohort convening and capacity building that they participate throughout the year. So that's a little bit of an overview of the process. And now I want to just give you a quick overview of the readers. That this refers to all of you who applied and volunteered to be readers. This year we had 360, more than 360 individuals who have applied and volunteered to participate with us in this process. We are incredibly gratified and excited about that number. This number has been increasing each year. When we first started this process, we had 159 people, I think, in 2016, and then last year we had 253, and this year we're up to 360. And that growth is really exciting for us. It means that people really value this process, and they feel like they are getting a lot out of the opportunity to participate in this grant making process. But and I just want to say just very quickly why we value a large number of proposal readers. And that is because ultimately we view this process as a collective conversation about the issues of racial justice and racial equity in our state. Fundamentally, we believe that justice and equity are relational and they must be co-created. So we want as many voices as possible in our conversation about the questions that our grant-making process seeks to ask and answer. What is racial justice? What does it mean? What does racial justice look like? What does it require in our state? Those are all questions that we need every voice to help us answer. So the more people who can participate in this process and bring their perspectives to those questions, the better our answers will be. So thank you all for participating in this process, and know that we deeply value and appreciate each of your voices in this process. One other thing I'd love to say about the readers in this process is that we really see the participation of all of the readers as a programmatic piece of our work. Each of the readers, as you know, had to fill out an application, and we ask people to articulate why they want to participate in this process and what about racial justice and equity is important to them. And for us, it is incredibly edifying and encouraging to read over 360 articulations of why racial justice and racial equity matter to Mainers. And we always get, we as staff get so much out of that. So we wanted to share just a couple perspectives that people submitted. And this is just from one individual's application, that racial justice is of critical importance to address racial justice and racial equity in real and meaningful ways if we hope to build a more just society. The fact that funding for this grant has been raised from the community and supports the work of community-based organizations is consistent with the entrepreneurial spirit that is so much a part of Maine's community spirit. We couldn't have said it better ourselves. And here's from another reader that my thinking about racial justice and racial equity has deepened and become clearer as a part of a larger vision for collective liberation, where all our people have what they need to survive, to be well, to take care of their families and each other, to heal and build stronger and more connected communities. It's a beautiful articulation of what we hope the readers get out of their contribution to this process.
So thanks, Phil, for walking us through the perspective of Maine initiatives from the high level, from the staff and from the board and from our community as to why this process is important. What I want to talk about now are the other side. So we have a huge number of readers in this process, and all of you are here because of the applicant pool. I'm very excited to say that we have 28 very strong applications in the pool, and it is up to us as a community of readers and as a grant-making committee to figure out how to take this group of 28 organizations and to bring that down to the 10 who are advancing racial justice and racial equity in a way that tells a story to our community about what that means to us. I'll just give you a second here to take a look at this list of organizations. What I find so powerful about this collection is that all of these organizations, they don't represent just one thing. They're not just one picture of what racial justice means in our community. Instead, we see historic preservation, we see work on tribal sovereignty and decolonization, we see immigrants' rights, we see Black liberation, we see good governance and political education, organizing and advocacy, environmental activism, health equity, all those different pieces, they all knit together to make racial justice in our state, or to advance racial justice in our community. And so it's not an easy process for us to go from this powerful list of 28 organizations down to 10 organizations that represent the wide breadth of what it means to advance racial justice and racial equity in Maine. So that really is where you come in. This process of being a reader, it's not a giant lift of time or energy, but it is so important in helping us to tell this story and to paint this picture about racial justice. So I am going to shift gears here a little bit, and we've gone from the big high level of what this process means to us and why it's important to the nitty-gritty of what we expect from you as you've taken on this volunteer process of being a proposal reader for Maine Initiative's Grants for Change program. First of all, I want to quickly review with you the reader schedule, which in fact we're already partially through. The important thing is that I want you to take time before you read your proposals, not only to, as you're doing right now, listen to this training session, which we very much appreciate you taking the time to learn about the intricacies of the process. I also want to draw your attention to a few resources. The first being the optional racial justice reading list that we've provided. If you have questions about what we mean by racial justice or what some of the terminology is around this big, complicated, challenging issue, the racial justice reading guides are a great place to start. We provide for you a racial justice 101 document that really is 101 level that you can use to learn kind of the basics of racial justice, and then a document that dives deeper into all of the different, what we call the sectors that these organizations work in. So if you're familiar with the general topics of racial justice, but you're reading a proposal about immigrants' rights and you want to understand the context of that work within racial justice, we've provided a reading list for you. So I do encourage you to take a look and to see if there's something that you might want to explore deeper before or after you read proposals. All of you, I believe, have completed the conflict of interest survey, which was due on August 10th. If you have not completed that, we are unable to send you your proposals to review. So if you haven't done that, it would take you a total of about 30 seconds to complete the conflict of interest form, so please take some time and fill that out as soon as possible. You should have received your proposals starting on August 15th, and you have an entire month to read those 3 proposals that we've sent you and complete the online evaluation form that we're going to go through right now. Those evaluations are due on September 15th. I do ask you to be mindful of that deadline. We have given you a big chunk of the summer, which we know means that this is perfect beach reading time for you to sit at a beautiful Maine beach, or perhaps you've gone somewhere else, read proposals, think about what racial justice means, taking in the beauty of the outside, or sitting in your office, or staying up late because the summer nights are oh so long, and take some time and read those proposals. But we very much ask you to try and stick to the deadline of September 15th for sending in your evaluations. Now, my expectations, or our expectations for you as a reader, are as follows. So definitely to acknowledge your conflicts. I know that you already filled out that form, but we'll review in a second what we really mean by conflict of interest. And if you have anything that you want to change on that form, it's very easy just to let us know. We do ask that you come with an open mind. Please don't come into this process saying, I want to fund this organization and not that organization. Instead, we really challenge you to come to this with a wide view of what could be racial justice work in our state, and really to take the time to learn more about the amazing work that's happening from grassroots organizations all across our state and in our communities. We do expect that you will review the 3 applications that we send to you. We rely on you, now that you have signed up, to provide honest evaluations of what you think about the organization and the proposal that you have read. And we do, again, ask that you meet the deadline of completing your 3 proposal evaluations by September 15th. Now again, you have already, I expect, completed your conflict of interest form. However, if that has slipped your mind, if you haven't had a chance to, you can go into your email and you should find a multitude of emails from us with links to the survey, but here is the link as well right here. The survey should take you, again, 30 seconds to a minute in total. It just asks you to look at the list of organizations that have applied and let us know if you feel you have a conflict. Please make sure you're clear with us, and we will not send you an organization to which you have a conflict. And with 28 organizations, we have not had anyone who had a conflict with more than 25 of them, so there has been an opportunity for us to send you 3 proposals for sure. If we, because it is a human process, if we have accidentally sent you a proposal to which you have a conflict, or after you start reading you realize you do actually have a substantive contact, just please get in touch with me and let me know, and we will happily swap that out and send you a new proposal to review. I also want to encourage you to consider taking the optional demographic survey. We do have a link here in this training, but after we send you your proposals and you get started in the process, we'll remind you again. It is important to us to understand who is reading proposals. Why have you decided to do this process? And what does the pool of proposal readers say about our community, and how can we compare the pool of proposal readers and that demographic information to the results of this process? We are data geeks over here, and so we're very, very interested in what we can learn, but we also recognize that we do not want to force you to disclose any information that you're not interested in. So please do consider taking this 100% optional and anonymous survey to let us know a little bit about demographics of who's reading proposals. That survey will be due on September 30th, so you have lots and lots of time to complete it. And again, it will be very short, and look for additional emails from us coming up with that link.
Okay, now I'm going to switch gears again a little bit and provide some general framing about our grant-making theme of racial justice and racial equity. This is the third year that Maine Initiatives is focusing on racial justice and racial equity in our major grants program. And this is an intentional commitment to a multi-year interrogation of what racial justice and racial equity mean in our state. We aspire and hope for this process of engaging the community broadly in a conversation about what racial justice and racial equity means, and by using that conversation to allocate our resources and identify the organizations who are doing that work as a central goal of our work. But in order to help you as you're starting to think about and read proposals, we do have sort of some general framing language about racial justice and racial equity that we'll share right now. So this is our definitional language, and it's intentionally sort of broad. We hope that a more precise or refined definition about racial justice and racial equity emerge through the grant making process. But in order to let you know what we're talking about and what we're thinking about when we say racial justice and racial equity, we have this three-part definition. The first part is that racial justice and racial equity are aspirational values of our community. We aspire to ever-increasing racial justice and racial equity here in Maine. The second part really refers to racial equity, and we think of racial equity as the condition where all people in our community are equally seen, valued, heard, respected, and supported. And we think of racial justice as the condition where race is not predictive of life outcomes. So while that definition is sort of broad and theoretical in a sense, we really view our grant-making process as where we get the more precise and specific definition about what racial justice and racial equity means. And your engagement with us in the selection of our grantee cohort is helping us to build a mosaic of what racial justice looks like here in Maine. Each year we select a cohort of 10 different grantee organizations, and we see each of those organizations as a tile in this metaphorical mosaic. Each of them brings some unique and indispensable part to our vision, our collective vision of what racial justice looks like and means in our state. And in the first year we had 10 tiles, and that mosaic was necessarily sort of general and incomplete. And in the second year we added a second cohort of 10 more organizations, and that gave us a mosaic of 20 tiles, 20 organizations. And the breadth and the depth and the complexity of that work was more representative of the full breadth of racial justice and racial equity work that needs to be taking place in our state, but yet it's still incomplete. And so this year we will be adding 10 new organizations, and we want those new organizations that we select, that you select through this process, to help bring us to an ever more sophisticated and nuanced and complete understanding of what racial justice and racial equity mean in our state. So as you're thinking about what racial justice and equity mean, and as you're reading proposals, here are just some key questions that we want you to be reflecting on. The first is, how does the organization, the applicant organization, articulate their understanding of racial justice and racial equity? And does that articulation resonate with you? Is their work getting at the essential issues of racial justice and racial equity that we seek to address? And the organization, in its work, do they have racial justice and racial equity as a core theme of their work? Is it a central element? And that is not to say, is it a specific program? It's not necessary that the applicant organization have a racial justice program or a racial justice or racial equity program as such, but we want to know, is their work fundamentally getting at those themes, or is it something that seems more tangential to their broader mission? And then another thing that we encourage you to consider is the leadership of the organization and the degree to which the leadership of the organization reflects the community being served. And lastly, we're really looking for, in this sort of metaphor of a mosaic, we're looking for, we acknowledge that there's a diversity of work that needs to happen across our state. There's diversity of geography, diversity of demographics. So we're looking for a diversity of organizations to make up our cohort. So we encourage you to consider that there are many different types of organizations and many different types of work that are important and necessary for advancing racial justice and racial equity. So definitely take that into consideration when you're evaluating proposals.
So here comes the nitty-gritty. We want to talk to you a little bit in these last few minutes of this training about how we actually hope you to go through the proposal evaluation process. So for each organization, we're going to ask you to evaluate a specific set of criteria that are directly related to different points on the proposal. So each organization has been asked to answer some set of questions, and those questions are directly connected to the criteria that you're being asked to evaluate. It should be fairly simple for you to go directly to the space where each evaluative criteria is being responded to by the applicant. Your online evaluation form is going to be split into 3 sections. There's one with general information to help us keep track of this process. Again, we do this all manually, so please bear with us. Then there are the core evaluative questions. You will be asked a multiple choice ranking question and then have an opportunity to provide optional comments if you'd like. And then the final piece are overall impressions and further comments. And this is the one place where we do require you to explain, why did you rate an organization the way you did? I ask that you read each question carefully and then choose what makes the most sense based on the way that you feel and your opinions and impression of each proposal. I want to remind you, importantly, things that we are not evaluating. So we have many proposals that have come in that are written by someone whose first language is not English. So please, you are not being asked to evaluate based on written language or proposal writing skills. Just because an organization has a paid grant writer or a professional staff member who can do this work doesn't mean that they are more eligible inherently for this grant. So please remember that poor grammar doesn't matter in this case. So don't, look at the underlying information. What is the organization doing? What is the intent behind their words, more than the grammar or the syntax of what you're reading. Also, organizational size. The organizations can have budgets up to $1 million, but that does not mean that we are looking for all giant $1 million organizations in the pool. It also doesn't mean that we're looking for all $600 organizations in the pool. We are really looking for a wide range. Just because an organization is small and has never received a grant, or who has a budget under $25,000, which is the value of the full grant, does not make them ineligible for this program. In fact, last year we were the very first grant that 2 out of the 10 organizations had ever received, and that's a thing that we're excited about and not something that we see as a negative. Also, please recognize that we are not evaluating based on the number of staff. So again, this goes to we don't want all large or all small or all volunteer-led organizations. We're really looking for a wide range of size. And again, that the track record of receiving grants is not an indication of how successful they will be in this program. It is okay for this to be the very first grant that they have ever received. It is also okay for them to be a large organization in which this grant is going to be relatively small impact on their budget, as it might for a very small emerging organization. Both of those extremes are okay, and again, not evaluative factors that we want you to be considering. Based on the past few years, we estimate that each proposal takes approximately 1 to 2 hours, and to be honest, it's probably a large number of people who read under 1 hour per proposal, and so our general estimate is that you need to book between 3 and 6 hours total for this process start to finish. So that's between August 15th and September 15th. Please do read your proposal. Some people read all 3 proposals and then do all 3 evaluations. Some people do a proposal, then evaluation, proposal, evaluation, proposal, evaluation. Either of those is fine, but again, please do budget your time accordingly so you do have enough time to get in your evaluations before the September 15th deadline. So, once we get all of this information in, what are we going to do with these ratings? Well, first of all, we are so thrilled that each proposal will be read approximately 40 times by 40 different people. For the fellow data nerds out there, that means we're going to have statistically significant information, which we're really excited about. And that's going to empower us to do a lot more data crunching and comparison work using the reader pool information. So all of your evaluative ratings, as well as the comments that you make, will be shared with the grant making committee and will be a key part of helping them to decide which organizations receive grants. Key questions that you bring up, if you have any red flags, or if you have stuff that you think that we should continue to explore more, will be identified, and we will explore those things that you bring up. So please don't hold back when you have questions. And additionally, we make a point to offer a meeting time with every applicant organization, whether they were successful or not in selecting a grant. And so the information that you share will be completely anonymized, but we do find this to be very, very valuable for organizations, again, both those who do receive funding and those who don't. And we really appreciate this opportunity to provide that feedback to the community. So now I want to quickly go through with you in this last section what the actual form looks like. So you should have received a link to our online Google form, and this is the very beginning. So again, this is the general information that we're looking for. Your address, email address, when entered into the system, will generate an email sent to you with a summary of your proposal evaluation. It will also allow you to go back in and make an edit if you need to. So we ask that you submit email address, your name, choose from the drop-down list the organization you're reviewing, and then you will also see indicated on the email you received the proposal number associated with your organization. It's very important that you share both the organization you're reviewing and that proposal number, because occasionally people make a mistake in entering the number or the proposal from the drop-down list, and this helps us to verify which organization you are actually reviewing. Once you've completed that general information, you will jump into the detailed evaluation assessment. So these are the criteria that, based on the narrative proposal that the organization has sent in. The first question is around organizational assessment, and this is asking you to think broadly about the organization, not specifically the racial justice work they're doing, but the organization in general and their ability to, and their goals to advance justice and equity in our state. So please take some time and evaluate the organization on this wide criteria of justice and equity. And again, keep in mind that while the multiple choice are required, you do not have to answer with comments in each one of these spaces, but if you do want to comment, that is definitely welcome. The next question is about the work of the organization. So not just the grand vision of the organization, but their specific work and how clear and compelling that work is. So again, please fill out the form with how much you agree with the statement that's made about the organization, and optionally share comments with us. Now, the third question is really the meat of the proposal evaluation process. This is the core place where we want to know, are they doing meaningful work that is advancing racial justice and equity in Maine? And this is your opportunity to share your gut feeling, your impression, your understanding of the community, and also to give us some comments about why you think this organization is advancing racial justice and racial equity. After that, we narrow in on the people who are being served, and this question is about target populations. And again, we want to know, is the organization working with traditionally marginalized racial and ethnic minorities in Maine in a true and authentic way? And give us your best approximation to that question. The next question is more specific about leadership. So very similar to the last question, we want to know not only is the organization working with traditionally marginalized communities, but how is the organization raising up and building the leadership capacity and leadership opportunity for those traditionally marginalized communities and leaders within those communities. After that, we ask you about the success story. So one of the things that becomes a real challenge for foundations is often this balance between understanding what success actually looks like and what's actually really practical to ask an organization to share, and especially in this case, a really small organization. So here is our attempt to get at what success means to that organization without requiring them to give us specific statistics or detailed facts and evaluation, but instead gives an opportunity for the organization to tell a story that really represents the success that they are looking for in their community. And this question asks you, does it feel meaningful? Yes, sort of, or no, and give us some information about why you think that success story was successful or not as successful. Finally, it brings us to the last part, the summary of your proposal evaluation. And this is really an essential question for us. We want to know, out of the proposals you read, is this organization one of your top choices? And I promise you, you could have all three organizations as your top choice and suggest that all three of them receive grants. You don't have to say only one can be my top choice. This is one of your top choices. Is it a good proposal? Definitely fundable, but not your tippy-top choice. Did you like the proposal but don't necessarily think that it should get funded right now? Or do you definitely say don't fund this organization? Here is the only place that we require require you to type in something more than just clicking of your multiple choice answer. Please take some time and explain, why did you rate this organization? What is the rationale behind your excitement about this organization, or maybe your lack of excitement about the organization that you're evaluating? Finally, we have an opportunity for any additional comments. Is there anything that you're wondering about? Anything that you want us to investigate further before we take all this information to the grant making committee? Something that really stands out that next year you hope this organization answers, and that would make their organization's proposal stronger. Do consider anything here, but again, other than this question about red flags, so is there a real problem that you want to highlight? This is all optional information to share with us. Once you click that blue submit button on the bottom of the screen, you will be emailed an email that just looks like this. The title will be 2018 Grants for Change Proposal Evaluation Form, and you can see that big brown button that says edit this response. Because you've entered your email address, you can go back into all of the information that you've put into the system and edit it. Do keep in mind, it is my understanding that you may lose some of the text that you typed if you go back in and do too much editing, so only go back if you felt like, you know what, I really want to change what I wrote there, but this is an opportunity to edit. If you don't want to go this way and you just have a specific question or thing that you'd like to add, you can also always email us and we will update that for you. When you submit, press that submit button. This is the message that will pop up, which is just our real heartfelt thank you. Forget the fact that everybody gets this same thank you. We very much appreciate the work and time that you're putting into this process. And it gives you, again, these two buttons down on the bottom, an opportunity to either edit the response that you just put in or to go on to your next proposal and submit another response. So please do either feel free to do one at a time and then continue to use the link that we've sent you in the email, or you can do all three proposal evaluations at once, but make sure you submit one, get the email confirmation, and then don't edit it, go and submit another response so that we get all three evaluations from you. If you don't receive an email confirming the evaluation you've put in, it probably means that we don't have it. So if you type it in and you don't get that confirmation email, please get in touch with us and we can look up and see, did it just go out into cyberspace and get lost, or did it actually come through and maybe the wrong email went in? So please do let us know. We're always open and available to help. All right. So in closing, thank you so much for being a proposal reader. We are so deeply appreciative of the time and energy and thought and perspective that you're sharing with us in this process. So what's next? Definitely complete the conflict of interest survey if you have not done so already. Keep an eye out for the optional demographic survey. If you feel like you'd like to, review the racial justice reading list. Then by September 15th, read and evaluate your three proposals. And as always, call and email us with any questions. We are available on the phone. Always, if you don't get us, just leave us a message and someone will call you back. Or you can email myself, Andrea at maininitiatives.org, or my colleague, Kristen Hebert, who's also helping to manage this process at maininitiatives.org. One last note about staying involved. So we hope that this is not the end of your engagement with Maine Initiatives, but either a continuation or just the beginning. Later this fall, we hope to host some community conversations about racial justice and equity, and then well into 2019. So please keep an eye out for that and do get involved. Check in with us. We will be adding you, if you're not already, to our email list, which is a great way to keep abreast of what it is that we're doing, and really do stay in touch, stay tuned in, and keep joining us to advance racial justice and racial equity in our community.
So I just want to close by saying my own words of gratitude and appreciation. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this webinar. Thank you so much for volunteering to participate as a grant maker. And we look forward to hearing from you and reading about your evaluations of these proposals. Have a great summer, everybody.